Hi, I'm Dwight Kennedy, and I'm here today with a reproduction of a 1955 Porsche 550 Spyder. This is a reproduction of a car that was produced by Porsche between 1953 and 1956. It was actually their first racing car and had quite a bit of success in its early outings against cars that actually had a lot more horsepower. So it was always kind of affectionately known as the Giant Killer. I purchased it pretty much completed, but I've done a lot of custom touches myself. I put all the graphics on it and the headrest and changed all the suspension and all the wheels and so forth. So I've done quite a bit of work to it myself to personalize it for the way I wanted it to be. Now, it's already painted, and this is a color that's a very close replica of the way they were in 1955. So the car is actually about 15 years old, but this is the original paint, and it's held up very well. Originally, this, of course, was made by Dr. Porsche, who originally made the Volkswagens. So actually, the early Porsche racing cars had a lot of Volkswagen-type parts in it, and this one does as well. The original cars had about 110 horsepower. This car, though, has a pretty highly modified Volkswagen engine in it that's actually putting out about 160 horsepower. It's about a 2.2 liter engine, and it has 2 Weber carburetors, and the car itself weighs only about 1,400 pounds, so it's pretty quick.
Have you had an opportunity to race it yet?
I have not, and I'm not planning on doing that. I did race cars in the past, but this is just a pleasure car and a show car for me now.
Very nice. Anything else special about it that you put on, or you just stayed pretty much stock?
It's pretty much stock. I, of course, put the numbers and the graphics on to make it look like the way they looked when they were actually raced. And the number 46 has special meaning to me because I raced Formula V's for about 30 years, and that was always the number that I had in Sports Car Club of America road race. Decals, we have the Flying Red Horse, and we also have the Castrol decal, and both of these are period correct. You can get these now that are more modern and more stylized, but I wanted the ones that were actually period correct. So these are ones that actually are just as they were printed in 1955. So they were a little bit more difficult to find, but I was able to find those on the internet as well.
Yeah, you didn't get to find them down the road.
No, they weren't at Walmart.
Interior, Dwight, you've got a wooden steering wheel and, really nice looking belts and seats and everything like that. I'm assuming that's all natural too. How did you do that?
Well, they came with the car, and they are very close reproductions to how the originals actually were made, and they're real leather. I got the seat belts, which are something you can get online, but they're very close to this kind of seat belts that were used back in the day, because back then there really weren't too many seat belts available, so the racers would actually go to Army-Navy stores and get seat belts just like these that they used in the Air Force. So that's what I put in there to try to reproduce the way they were, again, back in 1955.
That's interesting. How about the gauges too? I mean, are these racing gauges or just something normal that you would use?
These are gauges exactly as they were on the original cars. There's a tachometer and a speedometer and a few other things, but this is the way it actually was in the original car.
I like your headrest too there. That has functionality to it.
Yeah, originally they did not have those, but they started coming from the factory like that because they found out there was a little bit of aerodynamic advantage to having those. So that is one thing that I did have put on myself. I was able to locate one of those on the internet and have it painted and installed that.
It's interesting too to look back here and see the fastening belts and so forth made out of leather. That's an original touch too, I would imagine.
That's the way they were done originally. To make sure that the top didn't pop open. This whole top pops open so you can get at the engine, but they used these leather straps, and that's how they actually did it back in the day to make sure that it didn't come open when it shouldn't.
What kind of speeds could you expect from an engine like this with this car and its aerodynamics?
Well, I've not really explored the upper regions yet. I know the originals did about 110 or 120. I'm quite certain that this one would do a bit more than that, but I'm not taking those kinds of chances anymore in my age. Originally, when the factory had racing teams, they would have several drivers in the same type of car. And in order to identify which driver it was, they had different colored stripes. So they'd have a red one or a blue one or a black one and so forth. And so that was the purpose of the stripes, to identify the individual drivers as they went by quickly.
Did you choose the red for any specific reason?
Just because the interior was already red, and I thought the red made a nice contrast.
What kind of price tag would this bring? And if it were not a reproduction, what kind of pricing and availability would you have for the real thing?
That's a good question. Actually, there were only 90 original ones made between 53 and 56, and many of those were actually demolished in racing and so forth. In fact, one of them was James Dean's car. He died in an accident in one of these in 1955, I believe it was. But the original ones are quite rare, as you might expect, and I do know for a fact that the last original one that I know of that was sold at Mecum Auctions 2 summers ago went for $3.69 million. So they're quite expensive, the original ones, because of their rarity and the interest that they have among collectors.